It was supposed to be my sister's big day, but I'd never seen my name anywhere on the guest list. No RSVP, no save the date. Not even a text, just silence. Still, after all I'd done, helping her pick out colors, giving her my last check for the caterer, I couldn't sit home and let them erase me. So I put on my best dress, squared my shoulders, and drove across town to that giant church in Buckhead, where the Carters were suddenly somebody. The air was heavy with perfume and secrets. Every head turned when I walked through those double doors. I didn't care. I took the front seat, dead center, like it had my name on it. Somewhere deep in my chest, I could feel the tremor of years of being overlooked snapping loose, one heartbeat at a time. I was done hiding. Whatever was coming, I'd meet it face first. Every whisper in that room landed like a slap. I could feel people wondering if I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had. But there's a kind of peace in finally not caring who's watching. I'd spent years being the sister who stayed home, the one who made excuses when Mom forgot my birthday, the one who never got chosen. Now I was sitting where I'd never been wanted, right up front. And the silence was louder than any shout when the organ started. I closed my eyes, let the sound wash over me, and told myself, you belong here. The ceremony rolled on like I wasn't even there. Vows, laughter, all that glitter of perfection. But I saw the tension under Monique's eyes, the twitch when our mother's gaze caught mine. She'd built this image, this world where she was flawless, and I was invisible. I used to envy her confidence, her charm. But now, sitting there, I realized how fragile it was. Everything about this wedding felt rehearsed, staged, like she was performing for people who didn't even know the real her. When the preacher asked if anyone objected, the whole room held its breath. I felt that silence reach inside me like a hand. I didn't stand. I didn't speak. I just stared ahead, because some truths don't need a microphone. The ache in my chest wasn't jealousy. It was grief for all the years we'd never get back. Then it happened. The vibration of a phone echoing against marble floors. Heads turned. The organ cut off mid-note. The preacher frowned and someone whispered, "Answer it." That's when a man in a gray suit stepped through the side door. Detective Miles. He walked straight toward the altar, his voice low but clear. "Is there a Monique Carter here?" The world went still. My sister's hand slipped from her bouquet. Before that day, everything between me and Monique had already cracked. We just kept pretending it hadn't. After Daddy passed, she stayed close to Mama while I worked double shifts, covering bills that never had my name on them. Mama used to say, "Janelle, you're the strong one," like it was a compliment. But it was really permission to forget me. Monique was always the star, the one they dressed up for Easter pictures, the one they bragged about at church. Still, every time she called needing help, I came running. I kept thinking if I gave enough, they'd see. I never realized I was feeding a monster made of expectation and guilt. When Monique announced her engagement, she called Mama first, of course. I found out through Facebook. There she was. Diamond ring. Perfect filter. The caption, "Forever blessed." I laughed at the irony while standing in my apartment with rent 3 days late. A part of me wanted to be happy for her, but the truth burned deeper. She'd taken the same money Daddy left for both of us to pay for that engagement party. Uncle Ray told me to let it go, but something in me broke that day. You can forgive a thief, but it's hard to forgive family acting like it's owed to them. Mama never said it out loud, but I could feel her pride wasn't for me. Every visit turned into a performance. Monique bragging about wedding venues, and Mama nodding like a pastor at Sunday service. When I brought up the missing money from Daddy's estate, her voice went cold. "Don't bring that up again, Janelle. It's handled. That's when I realized handled meant hidden. The look in her eyes told me the truth. Mama knew, and she'd chosen her favorite long ago. Uncle Ray was the only one who told me the truth. He'd found old documents, withdrawals from Daddy's account, signed in Monique's name after he passed. He wanted to confront her, but I stopped him. I thought maybe she'd made a mistake. Maybe she'd pay it back. But when I saw that new car in her driveway, the same week my eviction notice came, I knew what kind of person my sister had become. Sometimes family ain't blood. It's whoever still checks on you when your world falls apart. The night before the wedding, I stood in front of my mirror, staring at myself. I wasn't going to beg for a seat. I wasn't crashing her wedding out of spite. I just needed to look her in the eye one last time and let her see what she threw away. Sometimes showing up is the loudest way to say you're done. The moment Detective Miles stepped into that church, time slowed like molasses. Every breath hung heavy. Monique's bouquet trembled in her hand. Mama rose halfway from her seat, whispering his name like a prayer gone wrong. I didn't know what he was there for, but the way Monique's face drained told me she did. He asked her to step outside, and she hesitated, smile frozen in place for the cameras still rolling. When Marcus turned toward her, his confusion shifted into suspicion. The air was thick with perfume, sweat, and lies. I stayed seated, my hands trembling, but my eyes never left her. After all the years she'd made me invisible, the truth was about to make her seen in the worst way. Marcus stepped closer to the detective, confusion giving way to anger. "What's this about?" he demanded, but the detective didn't answer him. He looked only at Monique. I'll never forget her whisper. "Can we do this later?" His reply came like a blade. "Ma'am, it's about the account under your father's name." The church erupted. Gasps, murmurs, cell phones raised like torches in the dark. Mama covered her mouth, eyes glistening. The preacher just stood there, lost between God and scandal. Monique's voice cracked when she spoke. "It's not what you think," she said, but even she didn't sound convinced. Marcus looked like the floor had vanished beneath him. He turned slowly toward me, eyes searching for truth I didn't want to give. I hadn't said a word, but somehow I was in it now. The sister in the front pew, the one who knew too much. Mama's tears fell quietly. Her pride had finally met its price. The detective asked her to come with him. She froze, lips trembling. Marcus whispered something sharp, but she shook her head, whispering back, "I'll fix it." That's when he stepped back, disgust etched deep into his face. The flash of a camera went off somewhere, and suddenly the illusion of the perfect wedding shattered. Monique tried to move gracefully, but her heel caught the train of her dress. The bouquet hit the floor. The sound echoed like a gunshot. They led her out of the church in silence. No music. No applause. Just whispers chasing her down the aisle like ghosts. Mama followed a few steps, but her knees gave out halfway. I sat there, still, the same way I'd sat through every slight, every dismissal, every maybe next time. Only now, the silence felt different. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel small. I just felt done. Chaos don't make noise at first. It hums low before it explodes. When Monique disappeared through those double doors, the whole church started buzzing like a hive hit with smoke. Aunties whispering, cousins texting, reporters from the groom's side already dialing numbers. Mama sat frozen in the pew, one hand pressed to her chest, the other clutching her purse like it held her dignity. Marcus was still at the altar, staring into nothing. I stood up slowly, like someone who just watched a storm tear down their house, and realized they were still standing. The preacher tried to calm the room, but the murmurs grew into arguments, half defending Monique, half demanding truth. That's how it always is in our family. Noise where there should be grace. Mama finally turned to me, her voice cracking like glass. "You knew, didn't you?" I wanted to lie, to protect what little was left of her pride, but my silence said it all. She looked at me like I'd pulled the trigger myself. "You let her walk into this?" she whispered, tears slipping through her mascara. The truth was, I hadn't planned any of it. I just showed up. But sometimes just showing up is enough to make people face what they've buried. Marcus approached, his footsteps echoing against the marble floor. "Did you know about the money?" he asked, voice low but steady. I hesitated, searching his face for blame, but saw only devastation. "I found out too late," I said. He nodded once, jaw tight, eyes rimmed red. "She told me she came from struggle," he said quietly. "But she didn't tell me she caused it." That line cut through the room like lightning. For a moment, all the noise fell away. Just me, him, and the weight of truth sitting between us like smoke that wouldn't clear. Uncle Ray arrived late, walking in just as the tension broke into shouting. He looked around, at Mama crying, at Marcus pacing, at me standing still, and sighed the way men do when they've seen too much already. "Well," he said under his breath. The truth finally paid its respects. I wanted to hug him, to collapse into the only person who never made me feel small. But something in his eyes told me this wasn't over. "You ready to stop protecting everybody but yourself?" he asked. I didn't answer, but he already knew. By the time the last guests cleared out, the church felt hollow. Petals, programs, and empty seats everywhere, remnants of a celebration that turned into judgment. Mama sat alone near the altar, staring at the floor. I wanted to comfort her, but some distances can't be crossed in a single night. I stepped outside, the late evening air cooling my skin. The sky was the same color as my dress, deep green fading into dusk. For the first time, I breathed without feeling guilty for taking up space. They brought Monique home the next morning. No cuffs, just shame. Mama opened the door like she'd been waiting her whole life for this kind of heartbreak. Monique walked past her without a word, still in the same wrinkled wedding dress, makeup streaked down her cheeks. I watched from the porch, coffee in hand, not out of spite, but out of exhaustion. Every part of me wanted to yell, cry, something, but the silence said enough. When Mama called my name, I stepped inside, heart heavy, ready to face whatever truth was left between us. Monique broke the silence first. "You couldn't just let me have one day," she said, voice trembling with a mix of anger and guilt. I looked up at her, tired beyond words. "You took every day I ever tried to have," I replied quietly. Her face hardened. "You think I wanted to be the favorite. Mama made me that way. That hit me deeper than any insult. Maybe we were both victims of the same love, twisted in different directions." Mama tried to speak, but her voice broke under the weight of her own guilt. "I did what I thought was right," she whispered. "You always took care of yourself, Janelle." She needed more. I laughed softly. Half disbelief, half release. "No, Mama," I said. "She just took more." Monique turned away, face buried in her hands. For a moment, we were three broken women sitting in the same room, all haunted by choices that looked like love, but felt like betrayal. Uncle Ray showed up later that afternoon, knocking once before stepping inside like always. He glanced around, sighed, then said, "Ah, look like yesterday's storm." I smiled faintly. Monique couldn't meet his eyes. He set a folder on the table. Bank papers, proof of everything. "Ain't no more lies left to tell," he said gently. "Now you can start telling the truth." He looked at me when he said it, and I knew he didn't mean just Monique. When Monique finally looked at me again, her voice was small. "You hate me?" I shook my head. "No," I said. "I just stopped trying to love you more than you loved yourself." She nodded, tears falling silently. Mama reached for my hand, then hers, pulling us together. For a second, the world felt still. Like maybe this was the start of something new. Not perfect, not fixed, but honest. Sometimes the only way to rebuild is after everything's already burned down. The next week felt like moving through fog. Quiet, but heavy. Monique spent most of her time locked in Mama's guest room, while the news of her arrest spread through the neighborhood faster than gossip at Sunday service. Uncle Ray called me one evening and said the bank papers proved it all. Withdrawals, forged checks, false signatures, all leading back to Monique. She hadn't just taken from Daddy's account, she'd used it to fund her entire new life. Weddings, designer bags, that condo in Midtown. It was all built on his grave. When I heard that, I didn't even cry. I just sat there on my couch, staring at the floor, feeling like the last piece of family I believed in had finally crumbled. Mama called the next day asking me to come over. When I arrived, the house felt smaller somehow, like all its secrets had taken up the air. Monique sat at the table, eyes swollen, a pile of documents in front of her. Mama stood by the window, back turned. "I told the lawyer I'd pay it back," Monique said, her voice barely a whisper. "It's too late for that," Mama replied without turning around. The weight between them was thick enough to drown in. I didn't know who to feel sorry for. Mama for the years she'd spent protecting a lie, or Monique for finally seeing herself without the shine. Later that night, Mama found me sitting in Daddy's old recliner in the den. The smell of his cologne still lingered faintly after all these years. "He left that money for both of you," she said softly. I thought if she had more, she'd stop needing so much. Her voice cracked. I was wrong. I nodded, not out of agreement but understanding. Pain don't always come from hate. Sometimes it's from love handled wrong. Uncle Ray came by later with the final paperwork from the lawyer. He handed it to me and said, "Your daddy named you co-beneficiary. You just didn't know it." My throat went dry. I opened the folder and saw the line, his signature, my name beside Monique's. Everything she stole was half mine. Uncle Ray put his hand on my shoulder. "Now it's time to decide what you'll do with it," he said. I stared at the papers. Not angry, not bitter, just tired. Sometimes justice don't feel like victory. It just feels like closure. I drove out to the cemetery that evening, the folder still in my lap. The sunset hit the marble headstones in shades of orange and rose. I sat by Daddy's grave, laid the papers down and whispered, "It's handled now." The wind carried a chill through the trees, like an answer. I realized I wasn't there to make peace with him. I was there to forgive myself. I'd spent years blaming me for letting them hurt me, but sitting there, surrounded by silence and truth, I felt something shift. I wasn't the forgotten one anymore. I was the one who made it through. A few weeks passed before things felt like life again. The calls from lawyers slowed, the gossip died down, and peace finally found the corners of my mother's house. Monique moved back in with Mama while she worked on paying restitution. We didn't talk much, but the silence between us wasn't angry anymore. It was healing. One morning, I walked through the kitchen and saw her washing dishes, humming a song Daddy used to play on Sundays. I didn't say a word, just smiled to myself. Sometimes forgiveness doesn't sound like, "I'm sorry." It sounds like shared quiet. Mama found me packing up my apartment that weekend. "You sure you don't want to stay?" she asked softly. I looked around at the boxes, each one filled with old memories and unanswered questions. "I'm sure," I said. "It's time." She nodded, tears gathering but not falling. For the first time, she didn't try to change my mind. She just hugged me, tight and trembling, whispering, "I see you now, baby. That was all I ever wanted." My first day back at work felt like waking up from a long dream. The hospital halls were the same, beeping monitors, distant chatter. But I was different. The weight I'd carried for years had shifted into something lighter. When I helped a patient out of bed that morning, she smiled at me and said, You look like peace, baby. I laughed softly. Maybe that's what healing looks like. Not perfect, not loud, just steady. Later that evening, I stopped by Daddy's grave again just to talk. I told him about Mama, about Monique trying to make things right, about me finally learning to rest. I didn't ask for anything. I just thanked him for the lessons hidden in the pain. The wind rustled through the trees like a soft, "You're welcome." For the first time, I didn't feel alone standing there. I felt rooted. As I drove home, the city lights of Atlanta flickered like tiny promises. I thought about all the noise that used to live inside me, the resentment, the shame, the need to be chosen, and realized it had finally gone quiet. Not empty, just peaceful. Some stories don't end in triumph. They end in truth. And sometimes, that's enough.